Today on Investigate TV, service members put their lives on the line protecting our country and our democracy. But the military healthcare system is failing them, with negligence ending in tragedy.
My wife was a victim. She really was. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They killed her.
Plus, a shocking look at the military justice system. Our partners uncovering in the Army, you're more likely to be detained for drugs than sexual assault.
Alvarado was free to walk around, and they put him 2 doors down from Asia's room in the same freaking barracks, same unit.
Investigate TV starts right now. Hello and welcome to Investigate TV. I'm Lee Zurich. Across the country, hundreds of service members and their families are in limbo, waiting on compensation for medical mistakes and misdiagnosis. For decades, they weren't allowed to file malpractice claims against the military. Congress has cleared the way, but a lack of transparency is still delaying justice. Joce Sterman has more in her investigation, Military Malpractice.
She was prideful, like she was proud. She loved it when people, thank you for your service.
When Master Sergeant Crystal Stuckey enlisted in the Air Force, she knew there was a chance she'd lay down her life for her country.
My wife was a victim. She really was.
But her husband, DeVeris, an Air Force veteran himself, never imagined the battle that would kill her would be against doctors also serving in uniform.
Do you feel like the military healthcare system failed your wife?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They killed her. They had plenty of opportunities to fix her or to try to fix her. And they didn't. They just kept pushing it down the road.
Records filed by the family's attorney claim Crystal Stuckey passed away in 2017 from a condition called hydrocephalus, essentially fluid on the brain. Her death was not some sudden event. Rather, her family claims it was an avoidable tragedy that started with a headache in 2015 and sent Crystal in and out of the emergency room and doctor's offices on military bases as often as 2 times a week.
They kept saying, oh, well, it's just migraines. So they prescribed medicine to her, and she was taking the medicine. She was doing absolutely nothing.
Crystal carried on for months. When DeVeris got orders to report to Korea, she single-handedly cared for their 4 children and continued to report for work at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, all while her family says she was fighting through crippling headaches, pain, and exhaustion.
I know she didn't want to die. She had a family. She had kids. She had a husband. She did everything she can do. She asked for help. She begged for help. Nothing happened.
DeVeris claims his wife was misdiagnosed with everything from vertigo to problems with her diet before records show she finally got an MRI in January 2017, more than a year after her first trip to the doctor. The Stuckeys claim doctors knew then she had hydrocephalus, but didn't reveal it to the family until April of that year, after Crystal's repeated follow-up calls. 2 months later, with fluid swelling around her spinal cord, Crystal finally got an appointment with a specialist. But she died in June, riding with her mother to the Alabama base where he was located, her 2 oldest children sitting in the back seat.
They're on their way to Birmingham. And when they got to Georgiana, that's when she woke up and said, hey, Mom, I feel like I'm dying. As a matter of fact, I know I'm dying. She took off her jewelry and everything, gave it to her mom and said, can you please get this to my husband and tell him I'm sorry. I fought as long as I could, but I can't take it anymore.
It's a death the Stuckey family blames on negligence and inattention by the military doctors Crystal saw over and over at Eglin. In February 2020, DeVeris filed a malpractice and wrongful death claim against the Air Force, saying Crystal's death could have been avoided if she would have received adequate medical care and treatment. The claim, one of hundreds we've learned, had been filed against the military since a change in law nearly 3 years ago opened up the floodgates.
Up until 2019, when a soldier was harmed or a victim of medical malpractice, he was denied a right to file a claim or file a lawsuit against the DoD for medical malpractice.
Attorney Natalie Kawam says that's because of a decades-old court decision called the Ferris Doctrine that essentially banned active duty service members from suing the government when they were harmed at home by military doctors off the battlefield.
How is it that a soldier that defends our country, that's willing to take a bullet for our country, has less rights than anyone else?
It's a question members of Congress on both sides of the aisle also couldn't understand. So for years, there was a push to pass a law that would allow malpractice claims against the Department of Defense, or DOD, but it went nowhere.
It's inexcusable.
That all changed with one of Kawam's clients, Special Forces Green Beret Richard Stayskull, whose terminal lung cancer was missed by military doctors. Legislation bearing his name finally gave service members the opportunity to file for malpractice.
So this law has been in effect since the end of 2019. You now represent dozens of clients. How many of them have been paid by the DOD?
None.
Zero.
Zero.
And how long have some of them been waiting? From the very beginning?
So from the very beginning.
It's that delayed justice that sent our national investigative team digging into the process. For the last 5 months, we've been fighting to obtain the hundreds of malpractice claims submitted to the military, filing Freedom of Information requests with each branch of the service and the DOD itself, repeatedly emailing to follow up, and even having our legal team send letters after some agencies failed to even acknowledge our request, let alone supply any information. To date, we've received no claims, so we reached out to each branch again by email, asking simply for statistics. Those requests show that since the process began, the Air Force has received 118 claims, issued 27 denials so far, and agreed to just 4 settlements. The Army has 177 claims in its files. They've handed down more than 100 denials and offered only 6 settlements to date. But even that isn't the full picture.
There are 439 claims that have been filed.
We had to get that from Congresswoman Jackie Speer, who not only spent years championing the law allowing claims, she's also considered one of the most critical eyes on the process that she says requires more transparency.
Do you feel like the military is doing what you intended with this process?
I would like them to do it more swiftly.
Speer says there are more than 30 cases in appeal right now and another 234 malpractice claims still awaiting decisions. That includes DeVeris Stuckey and Richard Stayskull, the man the law was named after.
And what would you say to these people who are still waiting?
I've had them sit here in my office, sit exactly where you are. Young, talented people who were volunteering to join the military, who, because of the care they received, are no longer even physically able to be in the military. So it breaks my heart, and the fact that they haven't gotten their payments yet is very disturbing to me. We've got to make sure that they're held accountable.
It's accountability for a process that has the military deciding whether it should pay for its own mistakes. And critics argue it's all happening behind closed doors. According to the 18 pages of rules laid out by the DOD, Attorney Kawam says claimants are unable to see any of the case discovery materials that shape the decision or obtain any information about the experts that ultimately help the military decide the case.
They won't provide the expert's name, what school he went to, which zoo he trained at, nothing. I wouldn't know if this expert was someone who worked at McDonald's. So they're playing judge and jury at the same time on their own, which is a complete conflict.
With this military thing, with those rules, enshrouded in darkness, I read that someplace, I can't remember where, but somebody wrote on there and said that it's enshrouded in darkness, and I agree 100%.
DeVeris Stuckey says he's been in the dark since the Air Force acknowledged his claim in this letter back in April of 2020.
How do you spell upset?
More than 2 years later, he's still a struggling single parent. He retired after Crystal's death, his sense of duty shifting from his country to his children, helping them cope with an unimaginable loss.
That's right 2 times.
Between homework help and personal healing, DeVeris waits for a decision years in the making. It won't bring back his wife or his children's mother, but it may finally bring closure to a family whose matriarch made the ultimate sacrifice.
And they don't know the pain that the kids wake up with every day. They don't know, yes, you move on, but that pain is still there. They don't know the pain that I wake up with every day, the guilt and everything I feel. They don't know that. I try to move on every day and not do, but it's still hard to focus when you know this stuff is lingering out there.
The Navy and Marines did not provide any information about claims despite our repeated attempts. Multiple requests for interviews with the Secretary of Defense and the Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marines were either declined or ignored. Coming up, the Army says it takes sexual assault seriously, but soldiers accused of the crime are less likely to be detained pre-trial than troops with lesser offenses, and victims are paying the price.
Because they failed her. They failed to help her. I gave the Army a healthy 19-year-old girl, strong and everything, and I got back a box with a flag on top.
Welcome back to Investigate TV. A shocking report on the Army's judicial process. Our partners at ProPublica and the Texas Tribune obtained data from more than 8,000 courts-martial cases. They learned soldiers in the U.S. Army accused of sexual assault are less likely to be detained ahead of trial than those accused of lesser offenses. And that can have a devastating impact on assault victims. Andy Pierrotti has more. We do want to warn you, there are some details of sexual assault in this report.
This is beautiful.
A proud mother shows off a room dedicated to her daughter, Asia Graham. An American flag, pictures of her time in the Army.
She loved being a soldier.
This is Asia taking the military oath after enlisting in 2019.
All enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign and domestic.
A promise to fend off enemies of the United States, not knowing she would need protection herself from a danger within the military months later.
Asia referred to it as the incident. She couldn't tell me her pain.
The incident Asia couldn't say out loud, a sexual assault by this man, Christian Alvarado, a fellow soldier, both stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. According to this signed confession obtained from the Army, Alvarado told the investigators she was drunk and so was I. We had sex, but she passed out. When asked why he continued to have sex with Asia, Alvarado replied, "I was in the moment." During the same interrogation, the 20-year-old was questioned about a second sexual assault allegation involving a different woman. Alvarado told the military investigator that sex with her was wrong due to how intoxicated she was. Had Alvarado been a civilian, a state prosecutor likely would have charged him with a crime. A judge would then have placed him in pretrial confinement or jail to wait for his day in court if he couldn't afford to post bail. But that's not how it works in the Army. Military commanders determine whether soldiers accused of crimes get pretrial confinement. And according to the Army, Alvarado's commander let him go at the time. A month later, a third woman accused Alvarado of sexual assault.
Why would you grant this guy the privilege of leave, knowing that there are 3 allegations that he's a sexual predator?
Jeffrey Korn is the director of the Center for Military Law and Policy at Texas Tech University. He served as a military prosecutor and a public defender.
From what I know about the case at Fort Bliss, I would have recommended pretrial confinement.
An investigation by our partners at ProPublica and the Texas Tribune uncovered the potential problem. The news organizations analyzed nearly 8,400 courts-martial over the past decade. It found soldiers accused of sexual assault are less than half as likely to be placed in pretrial confinement as those accused of other offenses, like drug use and distribution, disobeying an officer, or burglary. It's happening in Army bases across the country. At Fort Riley in Kansas, soldiers accused of other offenses were placed in pretrial confinement more than twice as often than when accused of sexual assault. At Fort Belvoir in Virginia, it was more than 3 times as higher. Back in Fort Bliss, commanders finally put Alvarado in pretrial confinement in March 2021 after 2 more women came forward with sexual assault claims. A military judge found him guilty of sexually assaulting Asia and another woman. He's serving 18 years in a military prison. Asia never got to see her room full of tributes.
This is when she was a baby.
She died from an accidental overdose on New Year's Eve 2020. Her mom believes Asia was self-medicating to numb the trauma from her sexual assault. She was 19 years old.
I gave the Army a healthy 19-year-old girl, and I got back a box with a flag on top.
Alvarado's attorney did not respond to our request for an interview. A former Fort Bliss spokesperson told ProPublica and the Texas Tribune that conditions to justify placing Alvarado in pretrial confinement were not initially met, but declined to clarify any further. Army officials defended pretrial confinement system it has. It says the nature of a soldier's offense is one factor to consider in a decision to put someone in pretrial confinement, but it is not the sole factor. The Army says a soldier's willingness to follow orders also plays a role. Want to take a deeper dive into some of our investigations? Read more of our stories at InvestigateTV.com. Up next, a service member reported a toxic workplace to the National Guard, then says she was found medically unfit for getting counseling to deal with it. Her story after the break. Welcome back to Investigate TV. Two women allege harassment in the North Carolina National Guard. They say they were forced out, one for calling out a toxic workplace, the other for successfully appealing a decision from the promotion board. Nick Ochsner in Charlotte, North Carolina investigates.
April Jeffcoat spent 15 years in the Army National Guard. She served in South Carolina and was assigned to the Pentagon before deciding to transfer to the North Carolina National Guard to work as a recruiter in 2019.
When I got here to North Carolina, it was an immediate struggle.
How would you describe the culture in the North Carolina National Guard?
Extremely toxic, sexist.
Jeffcoat was forced out of the National Guard in September. Records she provided shows she was found unfit for duty, not because she couldn't pass a PT test or because she'd gotten convicted of a crime, but because she sought counseling.
It makes me fearful for other people who also seek behavioral health treatment, because the military really promotes, take care of yourself.
Jeffcoat says she sought counseling for a hostile work environment, which she says only got worse after filing this complaint, alleging her supervisor repeatedly made sexist comments to her, including one incident when she had emergency surgery.
And I called my immediate supervisor and I was like, hey, I'm in the hospital. I'm on bed rest for 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow. His response to me was, well, Sergeant Jeffcoat, this is why recruiting and retention has a hard time hiring females, and I need to know how many people you're going to put down range next month, and I need you to be back in the office as soon as possible.
After she filed the complaint, she says the harassment only got worse.
I was told by my first sergeant that no one would talk to me because they were afraid of me because I filed an equal opportunity complaint.
This memorandum from Jeffcoat's unit commander says her supervisor would be counseled and reassigned, and recommended Jeffcoat be moved within the recruiting battalion or to another command. Instead, she was told she could move units but would have to report to a recruiting battalion in Raleigh, 3 hours away from her daily duty station in Gaston County.
They're like, you are not leaving recruiting. If you decide to leave recruiting, then we're going to initiate a medical evaluation board.
And that's what happened. These records show Jeffcoat was found medically unfit for duty because she was seeking mental health treatment. Specifically, one doctor involved in the decision referenced this letter from Jeffcoat's counselor, which says Jeffcoat needed to be reassigned because of the anxiety caused by her current work environment.
I am fearful for others who reach out for mental health issues, whether it's small or big, because it was certainly held against me.
Do you think anyone in the leadership of the North Carolina National Guard takes your complaint seriously?
They do not. I am one female fighting against many males.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the term good old boy system, but the North Carolina Air National Guard is known for a good old boy system.
Shantae Switten retired with 21 years in the North Carolina National Guard. Her job was what's called dual status, She wore a uniform and did her Air Force drill once a month, but she also had a civilian role in the same unit. She filed this complaint in 2016, alleging she was fired from her civilian job because she got a promotion over someone else in her Air Force role.
It became a personal attack. And by the end of me going through the chain and being granted my promotion by my unit commander, my leadership team had already sent word to the team here. By the time we get back, she needs to be fired.
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission found in favor of Swinton, in part because the North Carolina National Guard refused to respond.
If they're not exposed for what's going on, I think it's just going to be something that continues to happen to people. I think people are just going to keep quiet because who wants to lose their job? That's like hell. Who wants to lose their income?
A spokesperson for the North Carolina National Guard declined our request for an on-camera interview. He said he could not comment on a pending complaint. North Carolina Secretary of Public Safety Eddie Buffalo oversees the National Guard. His office emailed a statement calling for Jeffcoat and Swinton's allegations to be fully investigated at both the state and the federal level. Coming up, with inflation hitting its highest rate in decades, for many, saving money is top of mind. We have some simple tricks to cut costs after the break. Welcome back to Investigate TV. Sky-high inflation forces many people to cut back, and officials warn the fight against inflation could stretch into 2024. Rachel DePompa has some tips to keep soaring prices from draining your wallet.
Americans are shifting spending habits to fight back against the high cost of living. Whether it's gas, utilities, or even trips to the grocery store, we're all rethinking what we spend. Michael Joyce with the financial firm Agility says inflation gets in your head.
One of the big problems with inflation that we had 40 years ago was it got in people's psyche and their mindset. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if that turns out to be the case, then it's going to take a lot longer for inflation to come down.
Joyce says you can limit your spending by using cash instead of relying on credit cards. It forces you to make smart money choices when you can see that cash changing hands. It keeps you from overspending. Most consumers carry limited amounts of cash, making it easier to stick to a budget. Avoid paying for essentials with a credit card and racking up debt with high interest if you are not able to pay off that credit card in full each month. Joyce says if you're able to pay off your credit card each month, that's an important time to use it and build up those rewards. With this Watching Your Wallet, I'm Rachel DePompa.
Thanks, Rachel. And that's it for us. Thanks for joining us here on Investigate TV. Hope to see you next week.